Robert Steele. I'm a former spy. I created the Marine Corps Intelligence Command. Strat 4 is a fake. Strat 4 is basically a marketing gimmick. I absolutely do believe that Orlando is a false flag attack. There are basically two kinds of false flag. In one kind of false flag, many people die, and the shooter dies. And that is ordered by a very, very narrow, small group of people, and all of the first responders who are dealing with the bodies are unwitting. They don't know that it's a false flag. The other kind of false flag, which has been very popular in the United States recently, has been a false flag in which actors are used. And if you look at Orlando, you'll notice that there are actually no pictures of bodies. There is absolutely no evidence that 50 people have in fact died. And Paul Craig Roberts, an Assistant Secretary of the Treasury under Ronald Reagan, has just put out a very important call: show us the bodies. I have no direct knowledge about the bombings in Turkey, but I do believe that the bombings in Europe were created by a mixture of the Israeli Mossad and neo-Nazi French police and the Gladio stay-behind operation, which still has arms caches and still has many motives for striking fear into people's hearts. ISIS was created by Saudi Arabia and the Central Intelligence Agency. ISIS is a direct creature from the American invasion of Iraq and the Israeli desire to destabilize the Middle East. ISIS is not real. ISIS is theater. In the U.S. government, there are many factions, and we have what is called the deep state, which is factions within departments. For example, the CIA, there are 7 CIAs, not 1 CIA. There are people who have been self-selected and promoted by their predecessors who comprise a government that is in the shadows, and it outlives presidents. These people are capable of doing things that are very evil, including bombings and kidnappings and other things like that, and are not actually approved by the White House or by Congress. We are right now out of control. General Wesley Clark has appeared on YouTube and said we've had a foreign policy coup in the United States. Now, I will tell you that decisions in the United States are not made on the basis of evidence. Our intelligence community is a complete failure. It exists merely to spend money. Most decisions in the United States are bought and paid for. They are bought and paid for by the City of London with the Rothschilds, the Wall Street representatives of the Rothschilds, and in some cases, countries. For example, Hillary Clinton had a private server so that she could conceal from the government the fact that she was selling foreign policy decisions to Saudi Arabia and Israel. That was the whole point of the private server. The classified material that was on her private server was a sideshow. The real reason she had a private server was to conceal the fact that she was selling U.S. policy and U.S. interventions in the Middle East to Israel and Saudi Arabia. In my view, the single biggest threat to the Muslim world is Saudi Arabian Wahhabism. And Saudi Arabian money, which is being used to bribe everybody from the Malaysian Prime Minister on down to Nigeria. Muslims are not a threat. However, the perception of Muslims as a threat is being fed in part by the FBI using informants and creating false flag terror. There's an excellent book called The Terror Factory, which documents that 175 so-called terrorists, many of them Muslims, were in fact U.S. FBI informants who were entrapped and used to foster this climate of fear. Let me begin by saying that one of the greatest mistakes the West ever made was its betrayal of the Arabs after World War II. The British and the French betrayed the Arabs. They divided up Arabia, and much of what is happening today is a direct result of colonialism compounded by the American elective invasion of Iraq, for which there was absolutely no reason to go into Iraq. In the case of Libya, you have the French destabilizing Libya, and Hillary Clinton agreed to that in part because the U.S. was able to steal Libya's gold as part of the deal. Israel has always had a plan to destabilize and balkanize the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is paying to destabilize Syria because it wants an oil pipeline. And in fact, recent attacks against so-called Al-Qaeda and ISIS forces have actually been a pretext to take over territory intended to hold that pipeline. I cannot overemphasize the fact that Israel is not the only destabilizing agent in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is every bit as much to blame. I absolutely believe that the artificial boundaries that the West imposed around the world, but particularly in Africa, are long overdue for being destroyed. Certainly sells its services to CIA and other people, but you got to understand, CIA is stupid. CIA is using drones to kill people and only succeeding in 2% of the cases. The other 98% of the people that CIA kills are innocent men, women, and children. CIA is no longer capable of collecting human intelligence in the Middle East. CIA no longer has serious, deep analysts. They have a bunch of children that are hired because they're cheap. So I would say to you, as someone who's written 8 books on intelligence reform and someone who is the pioneer for the future of intelligence, I believe that we need multinational intelligence centers that rely primarily on open source information in all languages. And I would love to see Turkey create a regional intelligence center in which it can use all sources in all languages from all countries to confront the Western lies about the Middle East. My name's Robert Steele. I'm a former spy. I created the Marine Corps Intelligence Command.
Evet sevgili seyirciler, CIA ajanı Robert'ın açıklamaları bununla da bitmiyor. Devam edecek dedik. Devam ediyor.
Robert Steele. I'm a former spy. I created the Marine Corps Intelligence Command. I believe that World War III is on its way toward a nuclear event. I have no direct knowledge of any group, but I will tell you this. I think that state-sponsored terrorism is the greater threat. And today, the United States and France and Germany are sponsoring more terrorism than Turkey or Israel or anybody else. The reality is that every group, in my experience, represents a local, cultural, historical, political activism and is generally inspired by occupation and exploitation by outsiders. So, from my point of view, The United States has no real right to say you are a terrorist and you are not a terrorist. This is a matter that should be settled in an international dialogue and international courts. And again, I stress to you, Turkey needs to create a regional intelligence capability that can provide compelling information to the public that can confront the existing misdeeds of Western powers, Saudi Arabia and Israel. Hillary Clinton is a person who has sold her office to Wall Street, and she is a person who does not like men, who is extremely arrogant and corrupt, and I believe that she will lose to Donald Trump. Donald Trump has his own flaws, but his biggest positive feature is that he is not owned by corporations and the banks. Now, it's possible that Clinton will not be the nominee. It's possible that in the convention, Sanders and Clinton will be so tied that Joe Biden will come out of the convention as the presidential nominee, and Hillary Clinton will be basically told that she can either go to jail or be the ambassador to the United Nations. I think she'll choose ambassador to the United Nations. I believe George Soros should be given a chance to stop destabilizing Russia and other countries or be put in jail for managing his own foreign policy. He is spending money not only destabilizing countries overseas, but he is funding violent protesters against Donald Trump. In my view, George Soros is out of control and should be smacked down. Chris Hedges wrote a wonderful book called Empire of Illusion: The Loss of Literacy and the Triumph of Spectacle. The United States today is in chaos. Most citizens, 70% of our eligible voters, are not members of the Republican or the Democratic Party, and their votes don't count. Barack Obama was elected by 26% of the eligible voters. Half of the voters did not vote. George Soros's plan is to keep the party going. George Soros is a very happy man as long as there's a two-party tyranny where his money controls how the United States behaves overseas. Question. Many people don't realize that the European Union actually began as a steel cartel. It's a trade organization. It's not a political organization, and it's not well designed to represent the political will of the people. Many of the European Union's policies are in fact killing the public. They're destroying agriculture, they're destroying education and housing, and of course we can see they have no immigration policy that's working. There is a very real possibility that not only the European Union but the United States will break up. What is happening in the world today is decentralization. The European Union and the United States are at the very end of a long history of centralized power. And the problem with centralized power is that it's very ignorant and arrogant, and it makes many mistakes. So now I think we're going to start seeing countries withdraw from the European Union, and we may see states in the United States, such as Hawaii and Vermont and Texas and Alaska, say to the federal government, we're no longer doing this. We are going to be our own country. The world is changing. The European Union right now has one chance to get its act together. I have recommended that the European Union create a European Union Interagency Intelligence Center. One of the problems with governments, not just in Europe but elsewhere, is they don't make decisions based on intelligence, which is decision support. They're making decisions based on who pays them the most money. And those decisions based on money are not good for the people. So Europe is on a downward spiral in my view, and so is NATO. The Central Intelligence Agency recently concluded a deal with the German government in which the German government agreed that its intelligence services would be subordinate to the Central Intelligence Agency in a potential war against Russia. Now, there is historical information in the open source literature in the German language that says that after World War II, Germany became a vassal state. And there are secret agreements in which Germany is essentially an extension of the United States. At the same time, the CIA under Allen Dulles saved many of the Nazis. It imported many of the Nazis into the United States, not just rocket scientists and researchers, but some of the most hardened political leaders. And it arranged for their transfer to Argentina, and it saved much of the Nazi gold. It could safely be said that Allen Dulles rescued fascism, and fascism did not lose the war. The CIA then went on with money from the gold captured in the Philippines. This is a story told in a book, Gold Warriors by Sterling Seagrave. The CIA then went on to fund the return of fascist politicians in Italy, Germany, and Japan. And it went on to fund a number of dictators who are quasi-fascist. I would say that today, CIA is trying to keep Europe together, and it is trying to make Europe an unwitting accomplice at the popular level and a bribed accomplice at the political level in an all-out economic and cyber war against Russia that has money from George Soros and so forth. I encourage your readers to look up the Black Eagle Trust Fund online. I believe that CIA managed a $240 billion economic war against Russia, and that 9/11 was used in part to cover up the closure of those accounts and the migration of all of the captured gold into the U.S. economy. So for me, CIA is not trying to undermine Europe. It's trying to abuse Europe. World War III started in 1980. It's been going on for some time now, and it's been a mixture of electronic and economic warfare on the one hand, and two competing strategies on the ground. The Chinese strategy has been to build ports and railroads and export Chinese men to begin populating the southern countries. The U.S. strategy has been to build 1,000 bases overseas and have many military adventures and basically kill and displace millions and millions of people. I believe that World War III is on its way toward a nuclear event. Chernobyl and Fukushima have made nuclear events the new normal. So there is every possibility that there will be a small nuclear event, either a false flag attack where a dirty bomb or a nuclear bomb is set off, and it's not set off by the Russians, it's set off by the CIA pretending to be the Russians. I believe, though, that there are some good things beginning to happen. The BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have created a new economic system. And in the next 60 to 90 days, before the U.S. election, it's entirely possible that there will be a public economic revolution